She was known as the Mistress of Dread. Her fiery gaze could scorch the land, and her wrath could unleash plagues upon the world. But within her destructive power resided the potential for immense healing. Who was Sekhmet, the lioness goddess who almost destroyed humanity? The roar of creation in the golden age of the gods, the sun god Ra ruled over both deities and mortals. He was the divine father, the architect of all that existed, his light nurturing the land of Egypt. For millennia, humanity revered him, building temples in his honor and offering prayers to his life-giving radiance. But as time wore on, the hearts of men began to change. They grew arrogant and complacent, forgetting the divine source of their prosperity. Whispers of rebellion grew into open defiance, and their plots reached the ears of the aging Ra. His heart ached with the betrayal of his own creation. The humans he had fashioned from his tears now plotted against him, their ingratitude a bitter sting. Summoning the pantheon of gods to his celestial court, Ra sought counsel. The gods, seeing the disrespect shown to their sovereign, were incensed. They declared that humanity had to be punished for its insolence. It was then that Ra's gaze fell upon his own reflection, the divine power that resided within him, the fierce aspect of his being known as the Eye of Ra. To enact his judgment, he called forth this power and gave it form. From the blazing intensity of the sun, a new goddess was born, fearsome and magnificent. She was Sekhmet, the powerful one, a lioness-headed deity created for a single, terrifying purpose: to unleash divine retribution upon a rebellious world. Her mane was like the fiery corona of the sun, and her eyes held the promise of desolation. With a roar that split the heavens, Sekhmet descended upon the earth. She was the personification of divine rage, an unstoppable force of nature. She moved through the towns and villages of Egypt like a scorching wind, her claws tearing through the ranks of the conspirators. The blood of mortals flowed like a river, staining the sands of the desert crimson. Sekhmet, lost in a frenzy of slaughter, did not distinguish between the guilty and the innocent. Her thirst for destruction was insatiable, and she reveled in the carnage, wading through the fields of the fallen. The land that once flourished under Re's gentle light was now a landscape of terror and death. Humanity was on the brink of complete annihilation, its cries of agony echoing unanswered. The other gods watched in horror, realizing that the punishment had far exceeded the crime. The very creation they were meant to protect was being unmade. Seeing the world he had created drowning in blood, Ra was filled with regret. His intention was to teach humanity a lesson, not to erase them from existence. He had to stop Sekhmet, but her bloodlust was too great. No direct command would quell her rampage. A clever plan was needed. Ra ordered the gods to brew vast quantities of beer, 7,000 jars in total. He then had them mix the beer with red ochre and mandrake fruit, dyeing it the deep, dark color of blood. Under the cover of night, while the lioness goddess slept, exhausted from her massacre, the gods poured the blood-red liquid across the fields where she was expected to continue her slaughter the next day. At dawn, Sekhmet awoke, her throat parched, and her desire for destruction renewed. As she prepared to resume her terrifying work, she saw the fields flooded with what she believed to be an ocean of human blood. Delighted by the sight, she knelt and began to drink greedily. She drank and drank, the intoxicating brew coursing through her veins until she fell into a deep, drunken stupor. Her savage fury was pacified, her murderous instincts finally silenced by the potent beer. Humanity was saved from utter extinction, thanks to the cunning of the sun god. Before time, when Sekhmet finally awoke, her rage had subsided. The bloodthirsty lioness was transformed. Ra, pleased that his creation was saved, renamed her Hathor, the gentle, benevolent goddess of love, music, and joy. But the fierce aspect of Sekhmet was not entirely erased. It remained a part of her, a dormant power that could be reawakened. This duality came to define her. She became the goddess of both destruction and healing, the patron of physicians who could inflict plagues but also cure them. Her priests were skilled doctors, understanding that the power to destroy was intrinsically linked to the power to mend. Sekhmet represented the untamable and dangerous forces of the universe, but also the possibility of containing and transforming them for the good of all. She was the eternal reminder that even in the heart of the fiercest fire, there exists the potential for rebirth. She was the mistress of dread, but also the lady of life. Have you ever heard of a goddess so fierce, so powerful, that she almost wiped out all of humanity? This isn't a modern blockbuster plot. It's an ancient Egyptian legend, and at its heart is a deity with the head of a lioness and the heart of a raging fire, Sekhmet. Her name alone means she who is powerful, and believe me, that's an understatement. So grab a seat, because we're about to journey back to the sands of time to uncover the story of Sekhmet. The Eye of Ra. Our story begins in a golden age, when the sun god Ra ruled over both gods and mortals. But as Ra grew old, humanity began to lose its respect for him. They mocked his age, ignored his laws, and plotted against his divine authority. Their whispers of rebellion reached Ra's ears, and his heart filled with a fury as hot as the sun itself. He summoned the other gods to his celestial court, seeking counsel. How should he deal with these ungrateful mortals? The gods, in their wisdom, declared that humanity had gone too far. They needed to be taught a lesson, a terrifying, unforgettable lesson. And for that, Ra needed an enforcer, a weapon of divine retribution. He turned to his own divine essence, his very eye, and from it he created Sekhmet. Imagine the scene. A goddess emerges, not gentle and nurturing, but with the ferocious head of a lioness, her eyes burning with solar fire, and a thirst for justice that would soon become a thirst for blood. She was the embodiment of Ra's rage, a living instrument of destruction. Ra gave her a simple command: go to the world of mortals and punish those who have defied me. Sekhmet descended upon Egypt, and her arrival was not subtle. It was a storm of claws and teeth. She moved through the land like a plague of fire. No army could stand against her, no fortress could bar her way. With the strength of a lioness and the unrelenting heat of the desert sun, she tore through villages and cities. The rivers, it is said, ran red with the blood of her victims. This wasn't just a battle, it was a slaughter. Sekhmet was relentless, a divine predator in her element. The roar that echoed across the Nile Valley was not just the sound of a lioness. It was the sound of humanity's impending doom. She was fulfilling her purpose with terrifying efficiency. As the slaughter continued, a strange thing happened. Sekhmet, lost in her fury, developed a taste for destruction. She was no longer just punishing the wicked. She was reveling in the chaos. The cries of mortals became a symphony to her ears. Seeing this from his throne in the heavens, Ra was horrified. He had wanted to teach humanity a lesson, not to erase them from existence. The other gods pleaded with him to stop her, but how do you stop a force of nature? How do you calm a rage that is a reflection of your own? Sekhmet had become a threat not just to humanity but to the entire balance of creation. Ra knew he couldn't overpower her directly. He needed a clever plan. He commanded his priests to brew vast quantities of beer, thousands upon thousands of jars. But this was no ordinary beer. He had them dye it deep red with ochre and pomegranate juice until it looked exactly like blood. Under the cover of night, as Sekhmet slept, exhausted from her day of destruction, they poured the red-dyed beer all over the fields where she was expected to continue her rampage the next morning. When the sun rose, Sekhmet awoke, her thirst for blood raging. She saw the fields flooded with what she thought was a sea of blood, a glorious feast laid out just for her. Without a second thought, she began to drink. She drank and drank, lapping up the intoxicating liquid until the sheer volume of alcohol overwhelmed her. The fearsome lioness, the destroyer of mankind, became intoxicated. She grew drowsy, her rage subsided, and she fell into a deep, peaceful slumber. Her divine fury was finally quenched, not by force, but by trickery. When she awoke, she was no longer the bloodthirsty Sekhmet. The beer had pacified her rage. In that moment of calm, she was transformed. Her destructive aspect gave way to a new, gentler form. The cow-headed goddess, Hathor, a deity of love, joy, and celebration. Humanity was saved, pulled back from the very brink of extinction. Sekhmet, however, didn't disappear. She remained a powerful and respected goddess, but her nature was now dual. She was the bringer of both destruction and healing, the one who could send plagues but also cure them. This duality made her one of the most complex and fascinating figures in the Egyptian pantheon. The story of Sekhmet is a powerful reminder of the fine line between justice and vengeance, order and chaos. She is the embodiment of nature's untamable power, beautiful, deadly, and ultimately essential for balance. So next time you see a statue of a lioness-headed goddess, remember the tale of the sacred roar that nearly silenced humanity forever. Have you ever heard the story of a goddess so powerful, so enraged, that she nearly wiped out all of humanity? This isn't a modern blockbuster film plot. It's an ancient tale from the heart of Egypt, the story of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess. Buckle up, because today we're diving deep into the myth of the goddess who is both a savior and a destroyer, a force of nature unleashed upon the world. Imagine the golden age of Egypt, under the rule of the mighty sun god, Re. He was the creator, the sustainer, the king of gods and men. He brought light to the world, made the crops grow and established order, or mat, across the lands. For a time, everything was in perfect balance. Humanity revered Re, building grand temples in his honor and offering him their prayers. In return, he watched over them, a benevolent father guiding his children. But this divine peace wasn't destined to last. As Ra grew older, his human form began to show signs of age. He became frail, his steps slower, his voice less commanding, and humanity, his own creation, began to notice. The whispers started small, in the shadows of the temples and the bustling markets. Is Rio still fit to rule? He's old, weak. The reverence that had once defined their relationship with the sun god began to curdle into mockery and disrespect. Soon, the whispers turned into open rebellion. People stopped their offerings, laughed at his decrees, and began plotting against him. They believed the time of the great sun god was over. They forgot that even in his old age, a god's power is immeasurable, and his wrath, terrifying. High above in the heavens, Ra heard every word. The betrayal of his children, the very beings he had breathed life into, struck him like a venomous snake. His heart filled with a sorrow that quickly burned into incandescent rage. He was not just a king, he was the creator. And this open defiance could not go unpunished. He summoned the council of the gods, the most ancient and powerful deities in the pantheon, including Shu Tefnut, Gepnut, and the wise Thoth. He laid before them the treachery of mankind. They conspire against me, he declared, his voice trembling with fury. The ones I created from the sweat of my brow now plot my downfall. Tell me, what should be their fate? The gods were silent, contemplating the gravity of the situation. It was Thoth, the god of wisdom, who finally spoke. Mighty Ra, your eye must go forth and smite them. Let your divine power remind them of their place. The eye of Ra was not a physical object, but a manifestation of his immense power, a being of pure, destructive force. It was often personified by a goddess, and in this moment of ultimate fury, Ra chose his daughter, the gentle and beloved Hathor. He called upon her, but not in her usual form as the goddess of love, music, and joy. No, he channeled all of his rage, all of his desire for vengeance, into her. And in that instant, a transformation occurred. Hathor, the cow goddess of celebration, was consumed by the fire of Ra's wrath. She morphed, her form shifting and growing, her gentle features hardening into the ferocious visage of a lioness. Her soft hands became razor-sharp claws, and a bloodthirsty roar ripped from her throat. She was no longer Hathor. She was Sekhmet, the powerful one, the Lady of Slaughter. She was the Eye of Ra, unleashed. Sekhmet descended upon the Nile Valley like a scorching desert wind. She was a vision of terror, a whirlwind of claws and teeth. The conspirators, who had been laughing and plotting just moments before, were the first to fall. Their schemes and arrogance were no match for the raw power of a vengeful goddess. She tore through their ranks, her roars echoing from the cities to the furthest villages. But Sekhmet's rampage didn't stop with the guilty. The taste of blood had awakened a primal, insatiable hunger within her. Her divine purpose to punish the traitors was drowned out by a lust for destruction. She no longer distinguished between the innocent and the guilty. To her, all of humanity was a stain to be cleansed from the earth. She stalked the land, her lioness form a blur of speed and death. The Nile, the giver of life, began to run red with the blood of her victims. Fields were abandoned, cities fell silent, and terror became the new ruler of Egypt. Humanity was on the brink of extinction. The few survivors hid in caves and remote corners of the desert, praying for a mercy that seemed to have vanished from the world. Back in the heavens, the gods watched in horror. This was not what they had intended. They wanted to teach humanity a lesson, not annihilate them. Even Ra, whose anger had birthed this catastrophe, was filled with regret. He had created humans, and despite their betrayal, he couldn't bear to see them utterly destroyed. He had to stop Sekhmet, but how do you stop a force of pure, divine rage? Ra turned once again to the wise Thoth. We must end this. Ra commanded. My heart aches for my children. Find a way to calm the lioness before she devours the world. Thoth, a master of magic and knowledge, devised a brilliant plan. It wasn't power that would stop Sekhmet, but cunning. He ordered the priests and priestesses to gather all the beer and red ochre they could find. They worked through the night, brewing thousands of jars of beer and mixing it with the red ochre, a mineral that gave the liquid the deep, dark color of blood. Under the cover of darkness, they poured the crimson-colored beer across the fields of Dendera, the very place where Sekhmet planned to continue her massacre the next day. They created a vast, shimmering lake of what looked exactly like human blood. As the sun rose, Sekhmet returned to the fields, her thirst for blood unquenched. She saw the massive pool of red and let out a triumphant roar. Believing it to be the blood of her victims, she eagerly began to drink. She drank and drank, the intoxicating brew flooding her senses. The more she drank, the drowsier she became. The fire of her rage was slowly doused by the potent beer. Finally, the mighty lioness, the terror of Egypt, collapsed in a drunken stupor. She fell into a deep, long sleep. The world was quiet for the first time in days. When she finally awoke, the bloodlust was gone. The rage had subsided. She was no longer the rampaging eye of Ra. She was transformed once more, but this time back into the gentle and loving Hathor. Humanity had been saved, but the memory of Sekhmet's wrath was burned into their consciousness forever. The story serves as a powerful reminder of the dual nature of the divine, and indeed of nature itself. Sekhmet was not simply evil. She was a balancing force. After this event, she was revered not just as a destroyer, but also as a powerful protector. She became the goddess of healing and medicine, the one who could ward off plagues and cure 1,000 illnesses. It was as if, having brought the world to the brink of death, she now held the secrets to preserving life. The ancient Egyptians understood this duality. They would hold great festivals of intoxication in her honor, drinking beer to pacify the lioness goddess and celebrate their survival. They saw that the same power that could destroy could also protect and heal. Sekhmet's story is a timeless lesson about the thin line between order and chaos, creation and destruction, and the awesome, untamable power of the divine. Have you ever heard of a goddess so furious she almost wiped out all of humanity? Well, buckle up, because today we're diving into the epic and slightly terrifying tale of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of ancient Egypt. Imagine this. The great sun god Re, the king of all gods, is getting on in years. He's ruled for ages, but humanity, the very beings he created, have started to lose respect. They're plotting against him, laughing behind his back, and generally causing chaos. Ra, being the all-powerful deity he is, isn't about to let this slide. He summons the other gods and asks for their advice. Their solution? Unleash his eye, a fierce, destructive aspect of his power. And who embodies this power better than the mighty Sekhmet? Sekhmet is more than just a goddess with a lion's head. She is the embodiment of raw, untamable power. Her name literally means the powerful one. She is the goddess of war, plagues, and healing, a paradox we'll get to later. When Ra gives her the command, she descends upon the mortal world, not just to punish, but to annihilate. This is where our story truly ignites. Sekhmet, transformed into a bloodthirsty lioness, begins her rampage. She tears through towns and villages, her fury absolute. The world is plunged into chaos. The sands of Egypt run red, not with water, but with the blood of the people she slaughters. Her roar shakes the very foundations of the earth, and no one can stand against her. She finds a grim joy in her work, a savage satisfaction in carrying out Ra's initial command. The other gods watch in horror. This wasn't what they intended. They wanted to teach humanity a lesson, not erase them from existence. Ra himself begins to regret his decision. He sees the devastation and knows he must intervene before there are no humans left to rule over. But how do you stop a goddess who is literally the personification of unstoppable rage? You can't fight her. That would just make her angrier. You have to outsmart her. So Rhea comes up with a brilliant and slightly bizarre plan. He commands his priests to brew a massive quantity of beer. We're talking thousands of jars. But this isn't just any beer. He has them dye it red with ochre, to make it look exactly like human blood. That night, under the cover of darkness, they pour the beer all over the fields where Sekhmet is expected to continue her massacre the next day. As the sun rises, Sekhmet wakes, ready for another day of destruction. She sees the fields flooded with what she believes is a glorious ocean of blood, a feast laid out just for her. Overcome by her bloodlust, she starts to drink, and drink, and drink. She gulps down the red beer with ferocious delight, not realizing she's becoming incredibly drunk. The powerful, terrifying goddess of destruction, the lioness who almost ended the world, drinks herself into a stupor and passes out. When she finally wakes up, her rage is gone, quenched by the beer. Her bloodlust has subsided. The world is saved, thanks to a clever trick and a whole lot of alcohol. From this moment on, Sekhmet is transformed. Her destructive aspect is pacified, and her gentler side, the goddess Bastet, often represented as a cat, comes to the forefront. Sekhmet herself remains a powerful and respected figure, but now she is also seen as a great healer, the patron of physicians. It's as if by unleashing the worst plague, she also gained the power to cure all diseases. Festivals were held in her honor where, you guessed it, people would drink heavily to commemorate the saving of humanity and to appease the lioness goddess. So the next time you see an image of a lion-headed goddess from Egypt, remember the story of Sekhmet. She's a powerful reminder of the fine line between destruction and creation, rage and peace, and how sometimes the solution to a world-ending problem can be found in the most unexpected of places. Speed. Mysterious intro music fades slightly. Have you ever heard of a goddess so furious she nearly wiped out all of humanity? This isn't some modern blockbuster plot. It's an ancient Egyptian legend about the fearsome lioness goddess, Sekhmet. Her name alone means she who is powerful, and trust me, she lived up to it. Picture this, ancient Egypt. The sun god Ra, the supreme creator, is growing old. Humanity, seeing his weakness, starts to mock him and plot against him. Ra, being the king of the gods, is not about to let this slide. He convenes a council of the gods, and his eye, the very symbol of his power, transforms into the goddess of vengeance. Sekhmet, her mission? To punish the disrespectful mortals. And punish she did. Sekhmet, with the head of a lioness and the body of a woman, descended upon the land. She was a whirlwind of destruction, a plague of fire and fury. She relished her task, her rampage so devastating that the fields ran red, not with water from the Nile, but with the blood of her victims. She was the divine embodiment of righteous anger, a force of nature that could not be stopped. The other gods watched in horror. They had wanted to teach humanity a lesson, not erase them from existence. As Sekhmet's slaughter continued, it became clear she was lost in a bloodlust she couldn't control. The gods pleaded with Ra to intervene before there was no one left to save. Ra, realizing his punishment had gone too far, knew he couldn't confront the powerful Sekhmet directly. A direct fight would be catastrophic. So he devised a brilliant and rather clever plan. He needed to outsmart the lioness, not overpower her. This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Ra ordered the priests to brew a colossal amount of beer. We're talking over 7,000 jars. But this wasn't just any beer. He had them dye it deep red with red ochre and pomegranate juice, making it look exactly like blood. Under the cover of night, they poured this intoxicating mixture all over the fields where Sekhmet was expected to continue her massacre the next day. Morning came, and Sekhmet, thirsty for more destruction, returned to the battlefield. She saw the fields flooded with what she believed was a river of blood. Delighted, she began to drink and drink and drink. She lapped up the entire river of red beer, becoming so incredibly drunk that her violent rage completely subsided. She fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. The fierce lioness had been tamed, not by force, but by a divine trick. When she awoke, her fury was gone. The bloodlust had vanished, replaced by a sense of calm. In this moment of transformation, the fearsome Sekhmet became Hathor, the gentle goddess of love, music, and joy. The destructive force had been balanced by a creative one. This story isn't just about a near apocalypse. It's a profound lesson from the ancient Egyptians about the nature of balance. It teaches that even the most destructive forces have a purpose and can be transformed into something positive. It's a reminder that rage and love, destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin. The legend of Sekhmet shows us that within the fiercest power lies the potential for the greatest compassion. So the next time you see a statue of a lioness-headed goddess, remember the tale of Sekhmet. The powerful protector, the terrifying destroyer, and ultimately the savior who was tricked into saving the very people she was sent to destroy. Ever looked at a cat basking in the sun and thought, that could be a god? Well, the ancient Egyptians certainly did, and they took it to a whole other level with Sekhmet, the lioness goddess. But she wasn't just any feline deity. Her name means, she who is powerful, and believe me, she lived up to it. Sekhmet was the embodiment of the fierce, scorching heat of the desert sun, a warrior goddess and a master of healing. Talk about a complex personality, right? She was both the bringer of plagues and the one who could cure them. Picture this, a goddess with the head of a lioness crowned with the solar disk, a fiery eye of the sun god Ra himself. When you prayed to Sekhmet, you were dealing with pure, untamed power. So, how did this powerful goddess nearly wipe out humanity? The story goes that the sun god Re, growing old and weary, became angry with humanity for plotting against him. So he sent his daughter, his own eye, in the form of Sekhmet to punish them. And punish them she did. Sekhmet descended upon the earth in a bloodthirsty rage, a whirlwind of claws and teeth, tearing through the land and delighting in the slaughter. She was so consumed by her fury that she couldn't stop. Humanity was on the brink of extinction. The other gods watched in horror, realizing the punishment had gone too far. Re himself regretted his decision. But how do you stop an unstoppable force of nature like Sekhmet? You can't just tell her to calm down. This is where the ancient Egyptians got creative. Ra devised a plan. He ordered his priests to brew a massive batch of beer. We talking over 7,000 jars and dye it red with ochre to look like blood. They poured this mixture all over the fields where Sekhmet was expected to continue her rampage. When she arrived, she saw the vast red lake and, thinking it was the blood of her victims, she began to drink, and drink, and drink. The potent beer finally overwhelmed her, and she fell into a deep, drunken slumber. When she awoke, her bloodlust was gone, her rage was quelled, and she was transformed into the gentle, benevolent goddess Hathor, the deity of love, joy, and music. Humanity was saved, all thanks to a divine hangover. But Sekhmet's story is so much more than just a tale of destruction. She represents the untamed, raw, and often terrifying power that exists within nature and within ourselves. This is the feminine fire, the force of creation and destruction, the passion that can build empires or burn them to the ground. In our modern world, we often try to suppress this kind of intensity, especially in women. We're told to be nice, to be agreeable, to not make waves. But Sekhmet teaches us that this fire is not something to be feared or extinguished. It's a vital part of our being. It's the protective instinct of a mother, the fierce determination of an artist, the unyielding courage of a leader. It's the power to say no, to set boundaries, and to fight for what is right. Embracing your inner Sekhmet doesn't mean you have to go on a destructive rampage, of course. It's about acknowledging your own power and learning to wield it with wisdom and control. It's about transformation. Just as Sekhmet's rage was transformed, our own anger can be a catalyst for powerful positive change. It can fuel our drive to overcome obstacles and protect what we love. She is the sacred feminine archetype in its most primal form, a reminder that true divinity encompasses both the light and the shadow, the gentle touch and the warrior's roar. She teaches us that our fiercest passions, when channeled correctly, can become our greatest strengths. So next time you feel that fire rising within you, don't be afraid. Honor it. It might just be your inner lioness ready to guide you. Have you ever heard of a goddess so powerful, so fierce, that she almost wiped out all of humanity? Today, we're diving into the scorching sands of ancient Egypt to meet the one and only Sekhmet, the lioness goddess whose story is a whirlwind of rage, redemption, and healing. Imagine a goddess with the head of a lioness and the body of a woman, often draped in red, the color of blood, with a sun disk glowing above her head. That's Sekhmet, whose name literally means the powerful one, and trust me, she lived up to her name. She was the daughter of the sun god Ra, born from the fire of his eye. She wasn't just a warrior. She was the divine embodiment of vengeance and retribution. When Ra grew angry with humanity for disrespecting him, he didn't send a strongly worded letter. He sent Sekhmet. Unleashed upon the world, Sekhmet began a terrifying rampage. With the ferocity of a lioness hunting its prey, she tore through towns and villages, her thirst for destruction seemingly unquenchable. The land ran red and humanity teetered on the brink of extinction. The gods watched in horror. This wasn't what they intended. Ra himself, seeing the devastation, knew he had to stop his own daughter. But how do you stop a force of pure, divine fury? You can't fight fire with fire. So Ra came up with a clever plan. He ordered the priests to brew thousands of jars of beer and dye them red with pomegranate juice to look like blood. They poured this mixture all over the fields where Sekhmet was expected to continue her massacre. When she arrived, she saw the vast red lake and, thinking it was the blood she craved, she began to drink. She drank, and she drank, and she drank until she became so intoxicated that she fell into a deep, deep sleep. When she finally awoke, her rage had subsided. The bloodlust was gone. In its place, a different aspect of her nature emerged. This is where her story gets truly fascinating. Sekhmet, the destroyer, transformed. The same power that could cause widespread plagues and devastation could also be used to heal. She became Sekhmet, the Lady of Life, a master of medicine and a patron of physicians. Ancient Egyptian doctors were often her priests, calling upon her to ward off illness and mend the broken. This duality is what makes Sekhmet so compelling. She is both the warrior and the healer, a symbol of the fine line between destruction and creation. She was the scorching desert sun that could take life, but also the warmth that nurtured it. She was the fierce protector of the pharaohs in battle, their personal guardian who would breathe fire on their enemies. But she was also a motherly figure, sometimes identified with the gentle cat goddess Bastet or the loving mother goddess Hathor, showing a compassionate side that contrasted sharply with her violent introduction. Her story is a powerful reminder that our greatest strengths and our greatest weaknesses can come from the same source. Sekhmet embodies the untamable forces of nature and the raw power that exists within us, all a power that can be used to destroy or to heal. She teaches us that even after the most intense storms of rage, there can be peace, and that the fiercest protectors are often the most loving guardians. So the next time you think of a lioness, remember Sekhmet, the warrior, the healer, the survivor, and the goddess who held the fate of humanity in her claws and chose mercy. Have you ever heard of a goddess so powerful, so filled with rage that she nearly wiped out all of humanity? And yet she was also revered as a divine healer, capable of curing any disease? This is the story of Sekhmet, the lioness-headed goddess of ancient Egypt, a being of incredible contrasts. Her tale begins in a time of rebellion. The sun god Ra, angered by humanity's disrespect, sent his daughter, the gentle Hathor, to punish them. But as she began her work, Hathor transformed into the fearsome Sekhmet, the powerful one. Consumed by a bloodlust she couldn't control, Sekhmet unleashed a massacre of epic proportions. She rampaged across the land, her lioness form a blur of claws and teeth, her roar echoing in the ensuing silence. The fields ran red, and humanity was on the brink of extinction. Seeing the devastation, Ra was filled with regret. But how could he stop an enraged goddess? Direct confrontation was impossible, so he devised a clever plan. He ordered his priests to brew vast quantities of beer, thousands of jars, and dye it red with ochre to resemble blood. As the sun rose, they poured this mixture all over the fields where Sekhmet was preparing to continue her slaughter. Awakening, Sekhmet saw the red liquid flooding the land and, thinking it was blood, began to drink it ferociously. She drank, and she drank, until the sheer volume of alcohol overwhelmed her. She fell into a deep, drunken slumber, her rage finally quenched. When she awoke, her bloodlust had vanished, and she had transformed back into the benevolent Hathor. Humanity was saved, but the memory of Sekhmet's power was seared into the Egyptian consciousness forever. This terrifying myth reveals the core of Sekhmet as identity, a force of nature that embodies both destruction and protection. She was the bringer of plagues and epidemics, the lady of pestilence whose hot desert winds could carry disease. But she was also the one who could end them. This duality made her one of the most respected and feared deities in the Egyptian pantheon. To appease this mighty goddess, the Egyptians built magnificent temples in her honor. One of the most famous was at Memphis, where she was worshipped as part of a triad with her consort, the creator god Ptah, and their son, Nefertum. Her temples were not just places of worship. They were centers of power and healing. Imagine walking into one of these temples of the lioness. The air would be thick with the scent of incense. Along the walls, you would see hundreds upon hundreds of statues of Sekhmet. The famous Karnak Kashet alone unearthed over 700 statues of her. Many of these depicted her seated on a throne, holding the Ankh, the symbol of life, a stark reminder of her power over both life and death. Others showed her standing, ready for action, a sun disk above her head, signifying her connection to her father, Re. These statues weren't just decorations. They were believed to be vessels for the goddess's spirit, her Ka. Rituals were performed daily to appease her and prevent her from unleashing her wrath again. Priests would offer her food, drink, and precious items, chanting prayers and hymns to soothe her fiery temper. The priesthood of Sekhmet was unique and highly specialized. These weren't just ordinary priests. They were also master physicians. Known as the priests of Sekhmet, they practiced a form of medicine that blended science with magic. They studied anatomy, diagnosed illnesses, and prescribed treatments, but they always did so while invoking the goddess's name. They believed that all sickness was ultimately caused by supernatural forces, and only by appeasing Sekhmet could a true cure be found. For the ancient Egyptians, disease was a manifestation of Sekhmet's displeasure. An epidemic sweeping through a city was seen as the messengers or slaughterers of Sekhmet at work. Therefore, the priest's primary role was to pacify her. They would perform complex rituals, using magical spells and amulets to ward off these malevolent spirits. If you were sick, you would go to a Sekhmet temple, not just a doctor's office. There, a priest-physician would diagnose your ailment and then prescribe a course of action that might include both herbal remedies and specific prayers to the goddess. This connection to healing is one of the most fascinating aspects of Sekhmet. The very goddess who could destroy the world was also the ultimate source of health and well-being. She was the Lady of Life, a patroness of physicians. Patients would leave offerings at her statues, praying for recovery from scorpion stings, broken bones, or deadly fevers. They believed that if they could win her favor, she would personally intervene to destroy the demons of sickness plaguing them. It was a healthcare system built entirely on faith in her dual nature. To ensure her benevolent side remained dominant, massive festivals were held in her honor throughout the year. The most famous of these were the festivals of fire and the festival of drunkenness. These weren't solemn, quiet affairs. They were wild, joyous celebrations designed to replicate the myth of her pacification. During the festival of drunkenness, held at the beginning of the year, the entire community would gather. Music, dancing, and most importantly, vast quantities of wine and beer were central to the event. The goal was to drink to the point of intoxication, to ritually reenact Sekhmet's own drunkenness that saved humanity. It was believed that this collective state of inebriation would soothe the goddess Hes' heart and ensure a peaceful and prosperous year, free from her destructive anger. Torches would be lit, creating a beautiful spectacle of light, symbolizing the sun's power and the warding off of the darkness of disease. These festivals were essential for maintaining cosmic balance, or Mat. By celebrating the myth, the Egyptians actively participated in ensuring the world's safety. They weren't just remembering a story. They were living it, using ritual to keep the Lioness goddess happy and the forces of chaos at bay. The legacy of Sekhmet endures even today. She remains a powerful symbol of feminine strength, rage, and healing. She reminds us that creation and destruction are often two sides of the same coin. The power to annihilate is also the power to cleanse and renew. She is the fire that consumes, but also the fire that purifies. Her story teaches us that even the most terrifying forces can be pacified, and that within the fiercest exterior can lie the heart of a healer. From the brink of annihilation to the hope of a cure, the story of Sekhmet is a timeless epic of power, rage, and redemption. She is a goddess who demanded respect, and in return, offered a fragile but precious protection to the people who worshipped her. Have you ever felt a surge of uncontrollable anger? A fiery rage that feels like it could burn down the world? What if that feeling was embodied by a goddess? Today, we journey back to ancient Egypt to uncover the story of Sekhmet, the powerful lioness goddess, a figure of both immense destruction and profound healing. This isn't just a myth. It's a story about the untamed power that resides within all of us. Sekhmet's name itself means she who is powerful, and she was no ordinary deity. Imagine a goddess with the head of a lioness, crowned with the scorching sun disk. She was the daughter of Ra, the great sun god, and she was his fiercest protector, the embodiment of the sun's most destructive heat. Her breath was the desert wind. Her roar could shake the very foundations of the earth. She was the divine fury, the righteous anger of the gods made manifest. When the pharaohs went to war, they called upon Sekhmet, hoping to channel her terrifying strength against their enemies. She was the patroness of warriors, a symbol of brutal, unyielding force. But this power, as we'll see, was a double-edged sword. The most famous story of Sekhmet is a chilling tale of divine retribution. In the later years of his reign, the sun god Rhea grew weary. He saw that humanity, his own creation, was mocking him, plotting against him in the shadows. His heart filled with sorrow and rage. He gathered the other gods and asked for their counsel. What should be done with these ungrateful mortals? It was Nu, the primordial god of the watery abyss, who offered a terrifying solution. "Let your eye go forth," he advised, "and smite them for you." This Eye of Ra was a separate entity, a manifestation of his power, and the goddess he chose to embody this fury was Sekhmet. And so Sekhmet was unleashed upon the world. She descended upon the land of Egypt not as a guardian, but as an executioner. With the ferocity of a starved lioness, she tore through villages and cities, her claws and teeth stained with the blood of mortals. She reveled in the slaughter, her rage insatiable. Humanity was on the brink of extinction. The fields ran red, and the Nile itself was said to be choked with the bodies of the slain. The very gods who had unleashed her watched in horror. This was not justice, it was annihilation. Ra himself, seeing the devastation, was filled with regret. He had wanted to punish humanity, not destroy it, but Sekhmet was lost in her bloodlust. She could not be reasoned with. She would not stop until every last human was gone. How do you stop a goddess drunk on destruction? The gods knew that force would be useless against her. They needed cunning. Rhea commanded his priests to gather vast quantities of beer from all over Egypt. Then he had them mix the beer with red ochre and pomegranate juice, coloring it a deep, rich crimson, the color of blood. Under the cover of night, while Sekhmet slept, exhausted from her massacre, they poured this blood beer all over the fields, where she was expected to continue her rampage the next day. When the sun rose, Sekhmet awoke, her thirst for blood raging. She saw the fields flooded with what she believed to be the blood of her victims. Eagerly, she began to drink. She drank and drank, lapping up the crimson liquid until she was utterly intoxicated. The potent brew overwhelmed her. Her ferocious rage subsided, her lion's roar softened into a gentle purr, and the bloodthirsty goddess fell into a deep, peaceful slumber. Humanity was saved, not by fighting fire with fire, but by a clever trick that quenched the flames of her rage. When Sekhmet finally awoke, she was transformed. The drunken slumber had pacified her violent instincts. She was no longer the rampaging destroyer, but a calmer, more benevolent deity. In this new form, she became known as Hathor, the gentle cow goddess of love, music, and joy. This fascinating duality is at the heart of Sekhmet's mythology. She represents the idea that our greatest rage and our greatest capacity for love can come from the same source. The Lioness of War could become the goddess of celebration. It teaches us that even the most destructive force can be transformed into something beautiful and life-giving. It's a powerful metaphor for our own inner struggles, isn't it? The need to tame our inner lion without extinguishing its fire completely. This transformation from destroyer to healer is perhaps the most enduring part of Sekhmet's legacy. After her rampage, she became one of the most important goddesses of healing and medicine in the Egyptian pantheon. Her priests were renowned as skilled doctors. They understood that the one who had the power to bring plagues and sickness also held the power to cure them. They would perform complex rituals in her temples, seeking her intervention to ward off disease and mend broken bodies. It was believed that her fiery nature could burn away illness and purify the body. So the feared Lady of Pestilence also became the Lady of Life. Patients would leave offerings at her statues, praying that the goddess who almost unmade the world would now remake them whole and healthy. This shows the incredible complexity of ancient Egyptian beliefs. They understood that destruction and creation, sickness and healing, were two sides of the same divine coin. So what can we learn from the terrifying and powerful Sekhmet today? Her story is a timeless lesson about the untamed power within all of us. That fiery passion, that righteous anger, it's not something to be feared or suppressed entirely. It's a source of immense strength. Like Sekhmet, that fire can be a force for change, for protecting what we love, for fighting against injustice. It's the inner lioness that gives us the courage to face our battles. But her story is also a cautionary tale. Unchecked, that same fire can consume us and everything around us. It can blind us, leading to destruction we later regret. The challenge, then, is not to kill the lioness within, but to learn how to guide her. It's about finding our own beer of pacification, whether it's reason, compassion, or self-awareness, to temper our rage and channel that powerful energy towards healing and creation, rather than destruction. Sekhmet represents the ultimate journey of transformation. She is the embodiment of raw, chaotic power that learns to become a force for healing and protection. Her journey from destroyer to healer is a map for our own lives. It reminds us that our greatest wounds and our darkest impulses can often lead to our greatest strengths, and our most profound capacity for compassion. By acknowledging our own inner Sekhmet, we can learn to harness our power, heal ourselves and others, and walk the path of the modern warrior healer. It's the tale of Sekhmet, the ancient Egyptian lioness goddess, a figure of immense power who, according to myth, almost wiped out humanity. But this isn't just a history lesson. This is a message for right now, for what I believe is the great age of awakening we're all living through. So who is Sekhmet? Imagine a goddess with the head of a lioness and the body of a woman, often depicted drenched in the color red, symbolizing the blood she shed. She was the daughter of the sun god Ra, and her primary roles were as a warrior goddess and a goddess of healing. That's a powerful combination, right? Ferocity and restoration all in one divine being. The most famous myth about her tells of a time when humanity grew arrogant and plotted against Ra. Enraged, Ra sent his eye Sekhmet to punish them. But Sekhmet's fury was uncontrollable. She unleashed a massacre so intense that she developed a thirst for human blood. She tore through the land, her lioness nature completely taking over. The other gods watched in horror, realizing she wouldn't stop until every last human was gone. Ra himself, seeing the devastation, regretted his decision. Humanity was on the brink of extinction. So how did they stop a goddess in a divine rage? They couldn't fight her. Instead, they used cleverness. They brewed thousands of jars of beer, dyed them red to look like blood, and poured it all over the fields where she was rampaging. Sekhmet, thinking it was a vast pool of blood, began to drink. And she drank, until she became so intoxicated that she fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up, her bloodlust was gone. Her rage had subsided, and she was transformed into the gentle, benevolent goddess Hathor, the deity of love, music, and joy. This transformation from a force of destruction to one of creation and love is the core of her story. It shows that even the most destructive power can be pacified and transmuted into something beautiful. So why are we talking about this ancient myth today? Because I see the story of Sekhmet playing out all around us. We are living in an age of awakening. People are waking up to old systems that no longer serve us, to injustices that have been ignored for too long, and to the deep-seated need for change. There's a palpable energy in the air, a collective roar that says, enough is enough. This is the energy of Sekhmet. It's the righteous anger that rises up against complacency and corruption. It's the fierce, protective instinct that wants to burn down what is false to make way for what is true. This awakening can feel chaotic, even destructive, just like Sekhmet's initial rampage. We see it in global movements, in social upheavals, and even in our personal lives. Many of us are experiencing our own Sekhmet moments, those times when we feel a powerful, almost overwhelming urge to tear down old structures in our lives, whether it's a dead-end job, an unhealthy relationship, or a limiting belief about ourselves. This raw, untamed power can be scary. It feels like it could destroy everything. But what if we looked at it differently? What if this fiery energy isn't just about destruction, but about purification? This brings us to the idea of redefining power. For so long, power has been defined in very masculine terms: control, domination, hierarchy, and brute force. It's about conquering the outside world. But Sekhmet's story offers a different perspective. Her power was primal, instinctual, and deeply connected to justice. And importantly, her story isn't just about her rage, it's about her transformation. The wisdom wasn't in her destruction, but in the eventual return to balance. The gods didn't defeat her with more force. They calmed her with cleverness and turned her destructive potential into creative potential. This is the power we are being called to understand now. True power isn't just about tearing things down. It is about having the wisdom to know when to unleash the fire and when to calm the spirit. It's the integration of our fierce, protective side with our compassionate, healing side. It's not about being a lioness or a gentle cow goddess. It's about knowing you are both and that each has its time and place. This is a more holistic, more sustainable, and ultimately more potent form of power. It's the power to create lasting, meaningful change, not just temporary chaos. And this is where the rise of feminine energy becomes so crucial in our modern world. Now, when I say feminine energy, I'm not talking about gender. This energy exists in all of us, regardless of how we identify. It's the intuitive, nurturing, collaborative, and creative force that has been suppressed for centuries in a world that has overvalued masculine-coded traits. The story of Sekhmet is a powerful allegory for the return of this divine feminine power. For a long time, this energy has been either feared and demonized like Sekhmet in her rage or domesticated and trivialized. But now it's re-emerging in its full spectrum. It is the fierce protector, the mama bear energy that will defend life at all costs. It's the righteous anger that sees injustice and refuses to stay silent. But it's also the healing touch, the intuitive insight, and the creative spirit that builds new worlds from the ashes of the old. It's the wisdom of Hathor, who brings joy and connection after the field has been cleared. We are learning that this feminine power isn't weak or passive. It's a force of nature. It's the courage to feel deeply, to speak truth, and to demand a world built on compassion and respect, not just profit and control. Think about it in your own life. When have you felt that Sekhmet roar inside you, wanting to protect something you love? When have you felt the urge to burn down a part of your life that was holding you back? And when have you felt the calm, healing presence of Hathor after the storm, ready to rebuild with love and intention? We are all living this myth. The challenge is not to suppress the lioness for fear of her power, but to honor her, listen to her, and guide her energy with wisdom. It's about taking that raw power and, like the gods with the red beer, transforming it into something that nourishes rather than destroys. We are not meant to stay in a state of rage forever. Sekhmet's story teaches us that the ultimate goal of righteous anger is to create a space for peace, love, and joy to flourish. The destruction is a necessary clearing of the ground so that new, healthier things can grow. So if you're feeling that fire within you, don't be afraid. Acknowledge it. Honor it. Ask it what it's trying to protect and what it's trying to change. Then, ask yourself, how can I channel this immense energy not just to tear down, but to build up the world I want to live in? That is the great work of our time. It's the integration of our inner Sekhmet and our inner Hathor. It's the path to becoming whole. Have you ever heard of a goddess so furious she nearly wiped out all of humanity? This isn't a modern blockbuster movie plot. It's an ancient Egyptian story about the mighty Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of healing and destruction. Her name itself means she who is powerful, and believe me, she lived up to it. So grab a seat and let's dive into the myth of the goddess who unleashed a plague of fire and fury upon the world. Imagine ancient Egypt, a civilization at its peak. The sun god Re, the king of all gods, was growing old. He ruled from the heavens, but on earth, humanity had started to forget him. They mocked his age, they plotted against him, and they stopped showing him the respect he deserved. Hearing their whispers and schemes, Ra's heart filled with rage. He decided that humanity needed to be taught a lesson, a brutal one. So, he summoned his most fearsome aspect, his own eye, which took the form of a goddess. This was the birth of Sekhmet. She descended upon Egypt not as a gentle deity, but as a roaring lioness, her eyes burning with the fury of the sun. She was the personification of Ra's anger, a divine weapon of mass destruction. Her sole purpose? To punish mankind for their insolence. The stories say she waded through the land, her claws tearing through villages and cities. A river of blood flowed in her wake, and the screams of the people echoed across the desert. She was unstoppable, a force of pure, unadulterated rage, delighting in the slaughter. The other gods watched in horror. They had wanted to teach humanity a lesson, not to completely annihilate them. The scale of the destruction was unimaginable. Sekhmet, lost in her bloodlust, wouldn't stop. Humanity was on the brink of extinction. Ra, seeing the devastation, was filled with regret. He had unleashed a power he couldn't control. He had to stop her, but how do you stop the embodiment of your own fury? A direct confrontation was impossible. She was too powerful, too consumed by her mission. The gods needed a clever plan, something to outwit the rampaging lioness before there was no one left to save. This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. The gods couldn't fight fire with fire. Instead, they decided to use a bit of trickery. Under the guidance of Thoth, the god of wisdom, they hatched a plan. They gathered thousands of jars of beer and dyed them red with pomegranate juice or red ochre, making it look exactly like blood. They poured this mixture all over the fields of Dendura, the place where Sekhmet was expected to continue her rampage the next morning. It was a desperate gamble, but it was their only hope. As the sun rose, Sekhmet awoke, ready to continue her bloody work. But then she saw it, a vast lake of what she believed to be blood, glistening under the morning sun. Her thirst was immense. She bent down and began to drink and drink and drink. She drank so much of the red beer that she became completely intoxicated. The ferocious lioness, the destroyer of mankind, fell into a deep, drunken sleep. Her rampage was finally over. When she woke up, her anger had subsided. The bloodlust was gone. In that moment of calm, Sekhmet was transformed. The drunken sleep had pacified her, turning the raging destroyer into a more benevolent deity. She became Hathor, the gentle goddess of love, music, and joy. This dual nature is central to understanding Sekhmet. She represents the terrifying, destructive power of the sun's heat, but also its life-giving, healing properties. After her transformation, the Egyptians created festivals in her honor, where they would drink, dance, and celebrate to appease the lioness goddess and ensure she remained in her peaceful form. They understood that this powerful force needed to be respected and managed, not just feared. So, who is Sekhmet today? Is she just a character from an ancient myth? For many, she is much more than that. In modern spiritual circles and among followers of Kemeticism, the revival of ancient Egyptian religion, Sekhmet is experiencing a powerful return. She is seen as a symbol of feminine strength, righteous anger, and profound healing. In a world facing its own crises, many are drawn to her fierce energy, seeing her not as a mindless destroyer, but as a divine force that clears away the old and corrupt to make way for the new. She is the fire that purifies, the surgeon's scalpel that cuts away disease so that true healing can begin. This rising energy of Sekhmet is something many people claim to feel on a personal level. They call on her when they need the courage to fight their own battles, whether it's against illness, injustice, or personal demons. She represents the power to confront what is wrong, to tear down oppressive systems, and to protect the innocent. Think of her as the ultimate spiritual warrior. Her followers believe she provides the strength to face life's harshest realities without flinching and to emerge stronger from the ordeal. Her energy is intense, demanding respect and honesty. You don't approach Sekhmet with trivial requests. You go to her when you are ready to face the truth and enact real change in your life. This brings us to the concept of the eternal flame. Sekhmet is often associated with fire, not just as a destructive force, but as an eternal flame of passion, creation, and transformation. This flame lives within all of us. It's the spark of courage that helps you stand up for yourself, the burning desire to create a better world, and the inner fire that purifies your spirit. Connecting with Sekhmet is about tending to this eternal flame. It's about learning to control your own anger and passion, using it as fuel for positive change rather than letting it consume you. Her story teaches us that even the most destructive energy can be transformed into something beautiful and life-giving. It is a powerful reminder that our greatest strengths and our greatest weaknesses can be two sides of the same coin. The myth of Sekhmet is more than just an ancient tale of divine wrath. It's a timeless story about the balance between destruction and creation, rage and love, fear and healing. She reminds us that true power isn't just about the ability to destroy, but also the wisdom to heal and create. Her return in modern spirituality shows that her story is as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. She is a powerful symbol for anyone who needs to find their inner strength and fight for a better future. In the golden sands of ancient Egypt, under the scorching sun, a story was born, a tale of power so immense it threatened to unravel creation itself. This is the story of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess, whose roar could shake the very foundations of the heavens. Have you ever felt a fire burning within you? A power that feels both creative and destructive? You might be closer to the spirit of Sekhmet than you think, but who was she really? More than just a goddess of war, Sekhmet was the divine enforcer, the protector of the sun god Re, and a force of nature personified. Her name means the powerful one, and for good reason. Imagine this: the great god Re, ruler of all, grows weary of humanity's disrespect and rebellion. In his fury, he unleashes his most fearsome aspect, his own eye, which takes the form of a terrifying lioness goddess. This was Sekhmet, her mission? To punish mankind for their transgressions. She descended upon the land of Egypt not as a gentle rain, but as a consuming fire. With the ferocity of a starved lioness, she tore through villages and cities, her thirst for vengeance unquenchable. The fields ran red, not with the waters of the Nile, but with the blood of her victims. Humanity was on the brink of annihilation. She was the embodiment of divine rage, a plague upon the earth, a storm that could not be calmed. The gods themselves watched in horror. This was not the correction Ra had intended. It was a massacre. They realized that if Sekhmet was not stopped, not a single human would be left alive. But how do you stop a force as powerful as the sun's own fury? How do you tame a goddess drunk on destruction? The solution came not through force but through divine ingenuity. The gods conspired. They brewed a massive quantity of beer, thousands of jars, and dyed it red with ochre to resemble blood. They poured this intoxicating river across the land, directly in Sekhmet's path. Awakening to continue her slaughter, the lioness goddess saw the vast red lake. Believing it to be the blood she craved, she began to drink and drink and drink. The potent brew worked its magic. Her insatiable rage was soothed, her destructive instincts calmed, and she fell into a deep, drunken slumber. When she awoke, her bloodlust was gone. She was transformed. The lioness of slaughter became Hathor, the gentle goddess of love, music, and joy. The crisis was averted. Humanity was saved. But this story is more than just an ancient myth. It's a profound lesson about the dual nature of power. Sekhmet represents that fierce, untamed energy within all of us. The righteous anger that rises to protect the innocent, the strength that fights against injustice, and the heat that can either scorch the earth or forge new beginnings. Her story teaches us that our greatest power, our inner Sekhmet, must be balanced with wisdom and compassion. Just as the gods used cleverness to transform her rage, we too must learn to channel our fire, not to destroy, but to create, to heal, and to protect. Sekhmet, in her calm state, also became a powerful goddess of healing, capable of curing disease. The very force that could end life could also preserve it. Sekhmet's fire still burns in the hearts of warriors, doctors, protectors, and anyone who dares to stand up for what is right. She reminds us that to be fierce is not just to destroy, but to awaken a powerful, protective love. The divine roar is not lost. It lives in you. If this story has awakened something within you, follow our channel for more journeys into ancient mysteries and the awakening of the soul. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who has a fire in their heart.